Hey guys, I am DM Zone. This is Gamers Oasis. We're going to talk about something that's simple and basic. So BXD&D is something that is extremely, it's called Basic, it's called Expert, and it really should have been like Basic and Basic 2.0, really than Expert, because Expert really takes it into a different realm. I know they're trying to sound like they have authority, but it really takes them into a different realm of what I think the whole spirit of the game was based around. It was based around doing things once and have a list of things or possibilities to happen. Now, sometimes that can happen and sometimes that can't happen. And you just can't devise a system where the perfect thing is going to do that, because then you end up with dice rolls. I'm trying to do, like the other day, it was 2d6 plus 2d8 plus 2, and it gives you a spread of like 7 to 30. And I'm like, what? Anyways, so that was a thing I had to come up with yesterday, and I'm like, that's ridiculous. That's someone trying to be too fancy with the math. But anyways, so what I'm talking about is that in BXD&D, you want to roll one dice and have it mean as much as that dice could possibly mean. And then if it requires a follow-up dice, you want them to roll a dice, maybe a percentile dice, something that is standardized. And then that should be as forthcoming and should tell you as much as it's going to tell you. And then if you need to dig down deeper, then you dig down deeper. So, I'll give you an example of this. In BXD&D, they're as short as they possibly can be. You roll a d. You have an empty room. You roll a d6. You roll a 1, it's a trap, or it's an encounter. If you roll a 2 through 3, nothing. If you roll a 4 or 5, you get loot, and or unguarded treasure or whatever. And then on a 6, you get special. And they have this whole system, and I used it for the initial creating of my first BX campaign, Haunted Beginnings. But as I went along and as I started to populate things, I came up with sort of my own system. So one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to open it up a little to where things weren't so categorized. AD&D Second Edition, which is not BX, but it came out at the same time, would literally have multiple things listed for a tremendous detail, more detail than you probably need. You don't probably need to know the copper content. You probably don't need to know how many loaves of bread they have. Just simply putting bread there is fine, and you can dig down into it, or have a basic understanding of the situation, so you know how many people they may have to feed, so how many chairs they probably have. Some of that stuff could be important, but not everything. So I'm trying to add some randomness to the game, because randomness is certainly a part of early D&D. So when it came time for them to search the catacombs, to search the open crypts, to search the sarcophaguses, I literally wanted to have that be 100% unknown to me and to them, and that it will be what it will be, and then we go from there. So when I did the sarcophaguses, I gave them a greater chance of having both undead appear, and it was limited to undead for the most part, and for having magic items or items of value found within the sarcophagus. And I want to say it was the top 20% was magic or mundane or items of value. And then I had tools, and then I had like nothing, just like basic stuff that's rotten away. And then at the bottom 10%, I had a wandering monster encounter that would happen. And there could be traps in there too. They didn't get any wandering monsters though from this, surprisingly, or traps. And they didn't get any loot until the very, very last thing. They got some tools, they got some items of high quality, but they didn't get anything of any value. But when it came time for the open air crypts, the open tomes, the ones inside the wall, I wanted that to be not as pronounced, because they're not buried with the same type of fineries. They're not able to afford the actual sarcophagus, so they're going to be not probably as likely to have magic items or that type of stuff or be cursed by something. So I dropped that actually to a 5% chance of having a wandering monster, and then I had a 91 and higher percent chance of magic items, and then from like 70 to 90 I had, or 71 to 90 I had tools and that type of stuff, and so on and so on. Now in that 5% chance, I gave them different variables. So on that, I'd have you roll a d12 again. On a 1, 2, or 3, it would be traps, and then I'd have you go to the trap roll, and then everything else after that was a different type of monster that it could be. So open air crypts, most likely going to be skeletal at this point. So 3 and 4 would be skeleton, 5 would be zombie, 6 would be a ghoul, 7 would be, maybe D3 skeleton stood up in the area. So, but I also had non-undead in there too. So I had a swarm of rats, which they've been facing throughout this place, and I had a giant rat, and then I also had a swarm of spiders, which I had hoped they'd actually never rolled because, that could be devastating, as one could imagine. Anyways, they'd basically break open the spider sack and spiders would come pouring out and people be throwing Greek fire everywhere trying to get away from that. And then eventually you get down into the 12 being a white. And that would be the most deadliest thing you could face in this group. But if you rolled on the magic item side, I wanted to include less rolls that did more things. So the goal was you would roll once to find out what type of magic item it was, and I changed that list tremendously. I felt like that list was not balanced, would be the best way, but I don't know the exact wording I'd want to do. Help me out with wording like this in the future. But essentially, it has a weapons and armor list, and then it has a swords list. And on the swords list, you had the lycanthrope bane and the dragon bane and all these other types of banes, and it was like a D8 list with 2 or 3 different types of swords and a bunch of bane stuff. And then over here, for the same percentage chance, it was 50% armor and 50% more weapons, of which I believe you could actually get back to a sword again. So it's like I have a 20% chance of getting a sword, or I have a 20% chance of getting a sword, weapon, or armor. So really, sword was overrepresented. And there was not enough for people to play outside. And I know that was a key function that made the fighter good. But I don't like it. And I wanted to change it. So I did. It's my game, so I did. If you don't want to change it, then you can go ahead and take away all the extra representation I have here and put it back to swords, and that'd be just fine. I just think that it should be a little bit broader in that. So I made the 1 through 10, which is 10%. I made that armor, and then from like 11 to like 25%, I made that weapons of all types. So I lowered the chance of actually weapons and armor being found significantly. It used to be 20% to each. That took up 40% of your 100% roll. Didn't like that either. I feel like there should be way more chances for scrolls and potions, and that magic item should be a little bit easier to get. That to me was the simplicity of the rule. They rolled once to find out what type of thing they found. They rolled again to find out it was an axe, and then they just stopped. It's a +1 axe. This is basic. You're not into the expert rules. You don't have extra things. And then on the very end of the percentiles, the very end of the dice, if you rolled a special quality weapon, which should be very rare in my opinion, then you have like a 5% chance for that. And then I put like a 3% chance for special quality, because I wanted to have magical silver swords. I wanted to have magical cold iron weapons because I use cold iron, adamantium, and silver in my basic games for the different types of creatures they normally would affect. I also have loved Flame Touch forever as being a goodly aligned weapon. I also have Infernal based weapons that are evil based weapons. We have these in there. They just don't call them that. They exist in the mythology of the game, but they don't actually use them that way. And I think I've always used them that way, and it's just sort of my version of D&D, and that's how I've done it. I like it, but I'm getting too far off into the weeds. So you roll that, then you roll again to see what type of weapon it is and what or armor it might be, and then you go from there. And finding the Mantian shield is better than finding this time, and then we go on. Because again, this is basic D&D. They don't take into account a lot of things like durability and that type of stuff, and that's a good thing. So let's not hyper focus on the things it doesn't do and realize that they're still there. It's just a DM's discretion. Okay? Now, continuing on what I'm saying. When you go to higher level stuff and you get into I'm beyond third level. Being beyond third level now allows across the board you to do something. Anyone that is third level or higher, when they find an item, now gets to add their level to their roll when they're rolling for what type of whatever. And that's what I'm talking about. And when you're 14th level, you're going to be able to unlock the ability to find things that are +3. And there will be limited things that are +3. I'm not going to have +3 pickaxes. They don't make them. They're not a martial weapon. No one's taking this thing to war. They're just an odd person that wants to have a pickaxe as a +1 weapon. Could there be a +2 pickaxe somewhere in the world? I don't know. I haven't really crossed that bridge in my mind, but probably not. Let's be honest. Your primary weapons are your primary weapons. But should there be +2 warhammers for the dwarf fighters? Yes. Absolutely, there should be +2 warhammers for the dwarf fighters. Or +3. Does that mean that a cleric could walk around with a +3 hammer? Yes. He could be incredibly lucky or selfish and take it away from the fighter and give it to him. Depending on the circumstances, it'll be a problem or it won't be a problem. And that doesn't take it out of the DM's hand or the player's hand. It lets them decide what the best to do. They were talking about if they found a +1 mace because the cleric asked if there's a possibility for +1 maces. And I said there was. And I said, would that be funny? It'd be an interesting debate to find out whether a dwarf would pass on or the cleric would get, who would get between a dwarf and a cleric the first +1 weapon in the game. And it put them back a little bit and made them think for a second, because that's a very legitimate thing. Should the fighter or should the cleric get the first +1 magic weapon, knowing that it's not an abnormal thing that's going to potentially come up, or that they can eventually get if they were to find someone to trade with or whatever. And do I have magic shops? No. But are there people that are wanting to trade and sell items? Occasionally, yes. I like the roleplay aspect of it. There are bazaars that blow into town and then blow out of town, and how they get there and when they leave and all that type of stuff is more unknown than it is known. And that's 100% part of what I believe the game should be. There shouldn't be a fixed, on this corner there's a magic shop. But, gypsy traders that might blow into town or whatever, who knows. Anyways, guys, I do this video in the place of my campaign diary, because in the next campaign diary I'm going to be talking about this very thing. If you want to see how this rolled out and what the players actually got, I encourage you to watch that and then go from there. If you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps push this out to more people, which encourages me more to make more of these videos. Hit the subscribe button to follow along if that is something you want to do. Thank you, and I hope you guys appreciate it and have a great day. And I appreciate you watching these videos to this point.